Jaron Grant was a respected husband. Frina Kelvex was the quiet housekeeper. And Tara Grant was the woman who vanished without a trace. What happened inside their perfect suburban home would shock the entire nation. On a cold February evening in 2007, the peaceful suburb of Marlow Heights was about to experience something it had never known before. An unraveling tragedy hiding behind the walls of a seemingly perfect home. Tara Grant, a successful marketing executive and mother of two, had been missing for more than 48 hours. Her sister, Nira Vallon, was the first to alert authorities. Tara hadn't returned calls or responded to messages. That wasn't like her. She was punctual, responsible, and deeply connected to her family. Her job often required travel, but she always made it home when promised. This time she hadn't, and no one could reach her. Her husband, Jaron Grant, claimed she left after a minor argument, saying she needed space. According to him, she packed a small bag and stepped into a dark-coloured car that pulled up just past 10 at night. But that account quickly raised suspicions. There was no evidence of a rideshare or cab, and security footage from nearby homes didn't show any unfamiliar cars on the street that night. More troubling, Tara's suitcase, passport, and wallet were still inside the house. It looked more like someone who had been interrupted mid-routine, rather than someone planning a getaway. Neighbours began to share uneasy memories. One neighbour, living directly behind the Grants' property, recalled hearing loud noises around midnight just days before. Another said their dog had barked unusually that same night, as if disturbed by something unfamiliar. These weren't screams exactly, more like frantic thuds, dragging sounds and then sudden silence. No one had reported anything at the time, thinking perhaps it was late-night construction or a fallen object. But now, those memories felt like missed warnings. Detectives searched the Grant home, but initially found nothing alarming. Everything appeared intact. No signs of a break-in, no signs of forced entry or visible struggle. The children's rooms were tidy, the living room cozy, and Tara's side of the closet was untouched. Yet the home felt oddly sterile, cold even. Investigators took note of the overly clean basement, freshly painted with a chemical scent lingering in the air. Jaron said he had just done renovations and didn't want the room to look unfinished. Still, it seemed too clean, unnaturally so. Police dug into Tara's recent movements. Her last known contact was with a colleague, confirming a work report around 9:10 p.m. the night she disappeared. There had been no texts, calls, or online activity after that. Her social media, which she updated frequently, had gone silent. Her work emails showed no signs of out-of-town travel bookings, and her employer confirmed that she had no scheduled business trip at all. Jaron remained calm during initial questioning, repeating that Tara had chosen to leave and wasn't missing. He seemed more annoyed than concerned. His lack of emotion became another red flag. When police asked if they could see phone records, he hesitated. He said he'd have to check with his lawyer. He allowed a limited search of the home, but refused permission for a forensic scan. Still, with Tara officially declared missing, law enforcement pressed forward. As days turned into weeks, flyers with Tara's face appeared across Marlow Heights. Candlelight vigils were held. Her co-workers posted appeals on social media, hoping she was simply overwhelmed and would come home. But inside the Marlow Heights Police Department, investigators no longer believed they were dealing with a simple missing person case. They began building a timeline, piecing together every hour of that final day. Tara had gone to work, picked up her kids, made dinner, and then, according to Jaron, they argued. But what about after that? Why was there no trace of her leaving? Why would a successful woman vanish without her essentials, leaving behind her children and everything she cared about? More chilling still was what police didn't find. Any evidence that Tara ever left the house that night. That silence, that gap, that void in time, it was growing louder, and behind the closed doors of the Grant household, a much darker truth was beginning to surface. As detectives began to look deeper into Tara Grant's personal life, the carefully crafted image of the perfect suburban family began to crack. From the outside, everything looked ideal. 2 children, a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, and a husband who appeared supportive. But behind the polished smiles and scheduled routines was a marriage that had been slowly deteriorating for years. Friends of Tara described a woman who had been growing more anxious and unhappy, especially in the months leading up to her disappearance. She had confided in her sister Neera and a few close colleagues that things at home were not as peaceful as they appeared. Jaron Grant had lost his job nearly a year earlier and had not returned to full-time work since. According to one of Tara's co-workers, she had become the sole provider for the household, a burden that weighed heavily on her. She felt the pressure of managing both her professional career and the emotional strain at home. Jaron had become distant, moody, and controlling. He was known to check Tara's phone frequently and had once shown up unannounced at her workplace. Tara brushed it off as concern, but those closest to her saw it differently. It looked like obsession. Police were beginning to agree. They examined phone records and emails and discovered that Jaron had installed a tracking app on Tara's phone months before she vanished. The app allowed him to monitor her exact location and activity. When confronted, Jaron claimed it was to ensure her safety, but the explanation didn't sit well with investigators. The idea of safety seemed hollow, coming from someone whose wife had now been missing for nearly 3 weeks. Further digital evidence showed that Tara had been researching divorce lawyers. She hadn't filed yet, but the inquiries suggested she was making plans to leave the marriage. She had even searched for temporary apartments in nearby towns. That raised another question. Was she trying to escape something more than just a failed relationship? Friends said she often looked over her shoulder and jumped at sudden noises in recent weeks. She had also started sleeping in the guest room more frequently. Detectives widened their search into the family's recent history. They interviewed neighbours, former co-workers of Jaron, and even the couple's babysitter. That's when a new name surfaced, Frina Kelvex, a 28-year-old woman who had recently worked as a part-time nanny for the Grant children. She was described as polite, helpful, and unusually close to Jaron. Some neighbours had spotted her car, parked in front of the Grant home, even on days she wasn't scheduled to work. One said she had seen Frina entering the home late at night more than once. When detectives attempted to contact Frina, they discovered something alarming. She had vanished. Her phone was disconnected, her apartment emptied, and no one had heard from her in over a week. Her disappearance coincided almost exactly with the time police began to suspect foul play in Tara's case. It was too much of a coincidence. Investigators wondered if Frina knew something, or worse, if she had been involved. They obtained security footage from nearby gas stations and stores to try and trace Frina's movements. One blurry image appeared to show her withdrawing money from an ATM in a hooded sweatshirt, alone and looking around nervously. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. Her bank account hadn't been used since. Tension was mounting. It was no longer just a missing person case. Now there were two women unaccounted for, both with strong connections to Jaron Grant. Detectives returned to the house with renewed focus. Jaron had become more withdrawn, rarely speaking to media, and appearing irritated during questioning. He had hired a criminal defense attorney and stopped cooperating. Police were convinced that answers lay within that house. Something had happened there, something violent and planned. The signs were all there. A broken marriage, financial stress, surveillance, a secret relationship, and now a second disappearance. What had once seemed like a tragic case of a missing wife was turning into a twisted story of lies, control, and possibly murder. And as investigators prepared their next move, they were certain that the story of Tara Grant was far from over. 2 weeks after Tara Grant's disappearance, the investigation took a chilling turn. Detectives, now convinced that Tara had never left the house alive, obtained a full search warrant for the Grant property. With permission to search every inch of the residence, investigators returned, this time with cadaver dogs and forensic experts. The house that once appeared immaculate was now under a microscope, and the truth hiding behind the freshly painted walls was about to come into the light. The search team focused heavily on the basement, where officers had earlier noticed the strong scent of cleaning agents and new paint. Under regular light, the room looked pristine, almost suspiciously so. But when the walls and floor were examined under ultraviolet light, a horrifying picture emerged. The black light revealed traces of blood splatter near the far corner of the room, forming a pattern that matched the outline of a human body. The blood had soaked deep into the concrete before being hastily covered by paint. Despite efforts to clean and conceal the scene, the evidence was still there. Investigators collected samples and sent them for DNA testing. While waiting for results, a cadaver dog led officers to the detached garage behind the house. Unlike the main garage, this smaller structure was used for storage and had been locked with a heavy padlock. When police forced it open, they were met with a foul chemical odor. Tucked beneath a pile of gardening equipment and loose boards, they discovered a large plastic container. The lid had been sealed with duct tape. Inside were several layers of thick plastic sheeting and a bundle of stained towels. Though the contents were heavily decomposed and partially dismantled, investigators immediately suspected they had found human remains. Forensic teams were called in to carefully extract and examine what lay inside. Within hours, the remains were confirmed to be those of a female adult. A fingerprint match and later DNA testing would confirm what everyone already feared. It was Tara Grant. The horror of what had happened in that house began to come together. Tools found near the container, including a hacksaw and box cutter, were sent for analysis. Traces of blood were found on the blades. The evidence painted a terrifying image. Tara had been murdered, dismembered, and hidden in the very property she shared with her husband and children. What made it more horrifying was the fact that the container was placed just a few feet from where the children's bicycles and toys were stored. Investigators searched the rest of the garage and made another disturbing discovery: a laptop hidden beneath insulation in the attic space. On it was a folder labelled with a meaningless string of letters, but inside were dozens of bookmarked pages related to body disposal methods, chemical breakdown processes, and criminal cases involving spouses. The timeline of the searches coincided with the days leading up to and immediately after Tara's disappearance. There were chilling entries such as how long before police search your home and how to dismember quietly. This was no impulsive act. What had once looked like a possible argument gone wrong now revealed a long, premeditated plan. Detectives confronted Jaron Grant with the findings. He remained silent, refusing to answer questions and instructing his attorney to speak on his behalf. Despite the overwhelming evidence, he denied any involvement publicly. But police had more than enough to arrest him. He was charged with second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and abuse of a corpse. News of the arrest spread quickly. The community that had once rallied to find Tara was now mourning her violent end. The home where neighbours had gathered for prayer vigils was now a crime scene. Candlelight tributes turned to outrage. What seemed so unthinkable was now confirmed. A mother of two, killed and hidden in her own garage by the man she had once trusted most. And still, one question remained unanswered. What had happened to Frina Kelvex? Her name had been tied to this case from the beginning, and with every new discovery, her role in the story became more suspicious. Investigators believed she held the missing piece to the puzzle, but she had vanished without a trace, and time was running out to find her. With Jaron Grant behind bars and the remains of Tara Grant recovered, the community of Marlow Heights tried to breathe again. But detectives couldn't rest. There was still one missing person, Frina Kelvex, and her sudden disappearance continued to raise unsettling questions. Was she a witness, an accomplice, or possibly another victim? Investigators retraced her last known steps. Frina had worked for the Grants for less than 8 months, but her presence had become increasingly frequent in the weeks leading up to Tara's disappearance. She often stayed long after her shift was over and had been seen entering the home late in the evening. Detectives believed that Frina and Jaron were engaged in a secret relationship. It explained her loyalty to him, and perhaps even her silence during the investigation. But that silence had now become complete absence. Ear, phone, bank accounts, and social media activity had all stopped. Surveillance footage from nearby gas stations and ATMs offered few clues. That last ATM sighting had shown her alone, visibly nervous, and withdrawing nearly all of her available cash. Investigators pulled phone records and traced her last known location to a motel on the edge of a nearby county. The manager confirmed that a woman matching her description had checked in under a false name, but left after only one night. A cleaning crew later found the room abandoned, with no personal belongings left behind. It was a dead end. However, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former friend of Frina's came forward after seeing her name on the news. She told detectives that Frina had been acting paranoid for months, convinced someone was watching her. The friend recalled a conversation in which Frina admitted that she knew things about the Grant household, things she wished she hadn't seen. She had never gone into detail, but her tone had been fearful, not guilty. The friend also revealed that Frina had mentioned keeping a journal, a place where she wrote down everything, including secrets she was too scared to say aloud. The hunt for the journal began. Detectives searched Frina's old apartment again, this time with greater intensity. Inside a locked utility panel behind the water heater, they found a sealed bag containing the journal. It was nearly full, handwritten in a mix of English and shorthand codes, but investigators slowly began to decipher it. The entries were disturbing. They chronicled the deteriorating relationship between Tara and Jaron, but more importantly, they documented arguments Frina had overheard. Threats, shouting, the sound of breaking objects. One entry, dated just 3 days before Tara's disappearance, described a chilling event. Frina claimed she had come to the house late one evening and witnessed Jaron dragging something heavy down the basement stairs. She heard muffled screams and a banging sound, but was too frightened to intervene. In the days that followed, she wrote that Jaron had threatened her. He told her she better keep quiet unless she wanted to disappear too. That journal became a crucial piece of evidence, suggesting Frina wasn't an accomplice, but a terrified witness trying to escape a man she no longer trusted. Armed with the journal, authorities reclassified Frina's status from potential suspect to endangered witness. They began coordinating with federal agencies and issued a nationwide alert. Tips began trickling in. Unconfirmed sightings, calls from distant cities, but none panned out. Then, weeks later, a phone call came in from a women's shelter in Oregon. A woman matching Frina's description had checked in under a new identity. Staff members recognized her from a missing persons flyer posted in their building. Detectives flew in to confirm. It was Frina. She had fled across the country, terrified that Jaron's influence might reach her even from prison. Her mental and emotional state was fragile, but after days of counseling and assurance of protection, she agreed to speak. In her recorded statement, she confirmed everything from the journal, and more. She had seen the aftermath of the crime. She had helped clean parts of the basement under duress. She hadn't known Tara was dead at first, but once she realized the truth, she had wanted to run. Her testimony would become the final nail in the case against Jaron Grant. But more than that, it revealed just how far one person's fear could reach, and how the trauma of witnessing evil could silence someone long after the crime was over. The mystery surrounding Tara's disappearance was solved, but the damage it left behind was permanent, and for some, the fear would never truly fade. The courtroom was silent as Jaron Grant entered, shackled and dressed in a plain grey prison uniform. The man who once appeared polished, confident and respected in his community, now looked hollow. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, and he refused to make eye contact with anyone, especially Tara Grant's family. The trial had drawn national attention, with headlines painting Jaron as a cold and calculating killer who hid a monster behind suburban normalcy. But behind all the sensational coverage was a grieving family desperate for justice. The prosecution built a damning case. They presented the blood evidence from the basement, the forensic results from the garage, and the chilling internet searches from the hidden laptop. But the most powerful evidence came from someone who had once feared speaking at all, Frina Kelvex. Her testimony gripped the courtroom. She sat trembling in the witness chair, her voice soft but steady. She recounted the night she arrived at the house and saw Jaron dragging what she later understood was Tara's body. She spoke of his threats, the emotional manipulation, and the deep terror that drove her to flee across the country. Her journal entries were read aloud, each word painting a clearer picture of the months leading up to Tara's death. For the defense, there was little ground to stand on. They tried to suggest that Frina had exaggerated her account and that Tara might have died accidentally during a domestic dispute. But the evidence left no room for doubt. The planning, the clean-up, the lies, none of it pointed to an accident. It was a cold, premeditated murder followed by a calculated effort to cover it up. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Jaron Grant was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There was no reaction from him as the sentence was read. No apology, no tears, just silence, as if he had finally accepted the walls closing in on him. For Tara's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, but not peace. Her sister Neera spoke outside the courthouse, holding back tears as she described Tara as a devoted mother, a driven professional, and a woman who deserved so much more. The tragedy had left permanent scars on their family, especially Tara's 2 young children, who would now grow up without both parents. Frina was placed in witness protection. Though she had cooperated with authorities, her role in the cover-up, however unwilling, made her a target of public scrutiny. Some saw her as a victim, others questioned her silence. But the law recognized her testimony as crucial. Her courage to come forward even after running was what ultimately sealed the case. In the months that followed, Tara's story was covered by multiple news outlets, documentaries, and crime podcasts. Yet, for those who had truly known her, she wasn't just a victim in a headline. She was a sister, a friend, a mother, and a woman who had tried to hold her family together until it broke her. Her name became a symbol of hidden suffering, and her case sparked new conversations about domestic violence, control, and how easily danger can hide in plain sight. The home where the crime took place was eventually sold and renovated, but no, family stayed long. Neighbors said it carried an eerie feeling, a kind of weight that couldn't be painted over. The basement where it all began was sealed off, no longer in use. It remained a chilling reminder of what had happened behind those closed doors. In the end, the Tara Grant story became more than just a tragic murder case. It became a warning of how appearances can deceive, how control can wear the mask of love, and how sometimes the most dangerous places are the ones we feel safest in. The truth had come out. Justice had been served. But the echoes of that night would linger forever in the hearts of those left behind.